Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Making big money with big roller coasters is a lot of fun, and I talk about how profitable a certain ride is all the time, but a question we haven't answered yet is: what is the most profitable ride in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2? In this video we'll take a look at what the absolute maximum is that you can make per hour with a single ride in a variety of categories, starting with flat rides. Flat rides aren't known for being very profitable, as they usually have quite low stats and a mediocre throughput. Take your standard merry-go-round for example. Even if you have just one of them, you can only charge a maximum of €1.40 with a throughput of a little under 500 guests an hour. This will not make you a lot of money at all, but luckily the thrill rides are better. The Enterprise combines a good throughput for a flat ride of about 1,000 guests per hour with a good ticket price of €8, assuming you max out the scenery bonus. The profit per hour for this is about 8,600, which is definitely not bad considering it's a flat ride. However, it is, surprisingly, actually beaten by a gentle ride. The Flying Saucers ride already wasn't far behind if you lower the ride time to 20 seconds. It has a lower ticket price but a higher throughput, which nearly makes up for it. But the expansions introduced the Flower Power vehicle, which for some reason gives massive bonuses to its stats, including a 75% excitement rating bonus. This increases the maximum ticket price to $8.60, and with a throughput of nearly 1,600 guests per hour, this is a profit of €13,726 per hour, the highest you can get on a flat ride. However, if you would try this right now in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 Vanilla or Classic, you would find that you can actually charge quite a bit more. Here you can charge up to €11.8 for the Flower Power ride instead of just 8.6. This is because for very new rides, the ride ticket prices are calculated a little bit differently. How it exactly works is not important right now, but at some point during the calculation, the Flower Power ride with these stats gets a ride value of 29. This then gets multiplied by the age value and rounded down, depending on how many months the ride is old, which are these values in OpenRCT2. In Vanilla and Classic this is the same after 13 months, but for very new rides it adds 10 and 30 instead of multiplying by 1.2 and 1.5. In this table I put some prices in OpenRCT2 for a brand new ride and how they convert to Vanilla and Classic. For rides with very low stats and thus a low ticket price, the difference is the largest. The higher the ticket price, the smaller it becomes, until $18, where they become equal, and after that OpenRCT2 gets the higher ticket price. With this flat boost of 30, ride stats become less important, and a ride with twice the stats doesn't have twice the maximum ticket price anymore. Suddenly throughput becomes more important, but for the most profitable flat ride this doesn't matter, as the Flower Power ride keeps the crown. With a ticket price of €11.80 it has a profit of €18,834 an hour. This will drop off quickly as the ride ages, but for the purposes of this video we only care about the maximum profit possible, so we're going to assume that all the rides are brand new. Before we get into the bigger profit that you can get on tracked rides, especially roller coasters, I want to take a look at tower rides. Obviously the lift and the observation tower have way too low stats to beat the rotodrop and the launched freefall, so it's between those two. First, let's see what we can do with the freefall. The question here is, which launch speed is optimal? A faster launch leads to higher stats, but also a longer ride time. It turns out that the higher stats and thus ticket price slightly outweigh the extra ride time, so the most profitable launched freefall is the one with the highest possible ticket price. Because the freefall has such high stats, we can actually reach the maximum possible ticket price of €20. No matter how high your stats are, the game won't let you increase it any further. Without any decorations, this requires a launch speed of 111 km per hour, and with all the bonuses a launch speed of 90 achieves the same. These have a profit of 23 and 25,000 euros per hour respectively, significantly more than the Flower Power ride. With their cheap cost, this makes them amazing money makers, if you don't forget to charge a crap ton to ride them. a rotodrop doesn't get launched and instead has to travel upwards slowly, so it can never be more profitable than a launched freefall, right? Wrong. While a very tall rotodrop may have a long ride time, a small one doesn't. And although the small ones can't quite reach stats high enough for a €20 ticket price, the extra throughput they get from fitting 16 guests per ride instead of just 8 easily makes up for that. This rotodrop with 3 track pieces has a maximum ticket price of €16.4 with a throughput of nearly 2300 guests per hour. This gives a total profit of €37,500 an hour. In Vanilla and Classic you can charge slightly more with €17 for a profit of nearly 39,000 an hour. But what if I told you that this actually gets beaten by a flat ride? Yes, I have kept one of them as a secret weapon, and that is the maze. It is slightly different from the other flat rides as you have to custom build it instead of just plopping it down, but that is actually what makes it so incredibly overpowered. The one-tile death maze with a capacity of 16 guests reaches a throughput of about 8,500 guests per hour. With OpenRCT2's maximum ticket price of €3, this is a profit of 25,500 per hour, which is slightly less than the rotodrop, but in Vanilla you can charge $8 for the first 5 months. This leads to a massive profit of €67,940 an hour, which is insane. High as this is for a flat ride, it will still easily be beaten, as now we have arrived at tracked rides, which are the most profitable by far. We no longer have to worry about the maximum ticket price and the differences between Vanilla and OpenRCT2, as all the upcoming ride types can easily get to the maximum of $20. Now all that matters is optimizing throughput. For example, this splash boat can process over 4,000 guests per hour, and with a ticket price of €20 that's already over 80,000 an hour in profit, more than doubling that of the rotodrop. Rollercoasters can do even better. This twister coaster has a throughput of over 5,000 guests per hour, but which coaster type has the highest throughput possible? I answered this question in a video a few months ago, and the answer is the vertical drop coaster. With its 6 across cars, it can achieve a throughput of roughly 6,000 guests per hour, as long as your station is long enough so that there is always at least one train ready to board. So that's it then, right? Build a vertical drop coaster with stats high enough for a €20 ticket price, measure the throughput accurately, and we have our most profitable ride. Well, not quite, as we haven't discussed the photo section yet. Guests will sometimes buy an on-ride photo, and you can charge money for that. This isn't as straightforward as the ride ticket price, as it behaves more like a stall. Once guests have determined whether they'd like to buy a photo, they check the cost to see if they actually want to pay that price. They will always buy it if it's €3 or less, and above that it's determined by the values in this table. The column on the left is the price of the photo, and the other 3 are the chance that the guest will buy the photo for 3 different happiness levels. The happier they are, the higher the chance that they'll buy a more expensive photo. With some entertainers, we can make sure that the guests are always in the happiest column, so we can disregard the other 2. The probability only decreases every 4 increments of 10 cents, so to calculate the maximum profit we only need to look at the highest price within each probability bracket. If we multiply the prices with the purchase probability, we get the average profit per guest that wants to buy a photo. This is the result with the 20 cents production costs per photo taken into account, and even though some guests are willing to spend nearly twice as much, a price of $3.30 is the most optimal. Except it isn't. I did a practical test where I let this rollercoaster run for 6 years with the 8 different photo prices, and these are the results. Strangely enough, I made the least profit with a price of $3.30 instead of the most, and $5.30 was actually the most profitable. What's going on? Well, a lot of guests are going on the ride again after having bought a photo. They can only buy a photo once, so every rider with a photo is one less opportunity to sell another one. So while the chance to buy a photo on an individual ride is lower, most guests will ride the ride often enough that even with a 25% chance to buy it, you're still selling a photo to 80% of the guests that want to buy one. And the higher price makes this the most profitable. A seemingly valid solution that's even better is not allowing anyone that has ridden the ride to go on it again, but when testing that I sold no photos at all. It seems that guests never buy a photo the first time they ride a ride, so this won't work. Now we have everything we need to know to make the most profitable single-stationed ride. This vertical drop coaster has an endless supply of trains, a ticket price of $20 and a photo section with a price of $5.30. Now I will let this run for 10 in-game years to calculate the average profit per hour. It managed to get 6,080 riders per hour and in addition sell 576 photos per hour. These produced profits of 121,000 and a little under 3,000 per hour respectively. The photos don't add much, but every little bit counts. The total profit is 124,545 euros per hour. Although technically this is income and we should subtract the operating costs, but that's only 270 an hour, which is basically nothing at all at this scale. So the highest profit per hour on a single station ride is a little over 124,000 euros. Or is it? What if I told you that the monorail can be more profitable? And not just any monorail, but this one, with a throughput of just 3,300 guests per hour and a maximum ticket price of only $2. Yes, this is the most profitable single station ride in the game, and it involves a really interesting exploit. Let's see what happens if I build the monorail, set the price to 20 euros and open it. This should be way too expensive, but somehow guests are still deciding to ride it. Why? Because guests will pay anything for a ride that doesn't have its stats calculated yet. Okay, but after the train goes around once, its stats will be calculated, and besides that, the throughput is still much lower anyway. Ah, but there is a solution for that too. Simply wait for all the guests to board, pause the game, double close and reopen the ride and unpause the game. The guests that just boarded are now expelled through the exit and there is a new empty train for new guests to board. The stats will never be calculated because it never completes a lap and the throughput will be super high. But why a monorail though? Why can't we do this with a roller coaster? This is for two reasons. Firstly, this trick doesn't work nearly as well with roller coasters, as guests have a 90% chance to not enter the queue line of a ride without stats if that ride registers G-forces. This is to prevent guests from going on extreme rides, which makes it extremely hard to get enough guests to join the queue line to maintain the throughput of 6,000 guests per hour. The second reason is that these monorail trains have a capacity of 70 guests, which is the highest in the game. Every time you reset the ride, there is a little bit of time where no guests are boarding, so the less frequently that happens, the better. Operating this ride is quite manual and requires precise timing, so we can't simply speed up the game to quickly do a several year-long test. Instead, I will be doing this for just 2 months and then extrapolate to the number of guests per hour. While doing this, the throughput reached almost 8,000 guests an hour, which is about a third more than the vertical drop coaster got. Seeing these numbers, the average that we calculate should be around 7,950. However, it isn't. In these 2 months, 2,579 guests rode the ride, which corresponds to 9,092 an hour, about 1,000 more than was displayed. I double checked it and the calculation is correct, which means that this method causes the game to not count about 12% of the guests that board the ride when calculating the throughput. Since no stats are calculated, there are no operating costs, so the profit per hour of this monorail is 181,835 euros, nearly 50% more than the coaster. But that is only one station. What about rides with multiple stations? Before we get to that, I want to quickly return to the tower rides. You can't use the reset method on flat rides as their stats get calculated instantly, but you can use it on tower rides. The double-deck observation tower has a capacity of 32 guests, which will do quite well here. I managed to get a throughput of over 5,400 guests per hour with a profit of 108,109 euros an hour, nearly tripling that of the Rotodrop. Okay, back to roller coasters. In my video about the highest throughput possible, we used this design to get about 20,000 guests an hour. Of course this won't work, as it has terrible stats, so we'll need to alter it a little bit. This design has a bit more track in every section, but otherwise functions the same. With 7 trains on 8 block sections and very short ride times, there's always a train ready to board at all 4 stations. The twister coaster is a little bit less efficient than the vertical drop coaster, but since the vertical drop coaster has no boosters, it cannot do this setup, as it would take way too long to travel to the next station. This ride manages to get a throughput of 20,500 guests and sell almost 1200 photos every hour for a profit of 414,389 euros an hour. This is completely ridiculous, but can we do better with the monorail strategy? No. Or at least not with a monorail. This strategy relies on the train respawning in the correct place, and all the trains will spawn at station 1, no matter how many you have. However, you can do this with roller coasters. If your ride has block sections and the maximum number of trains, a train will spawn at every block section except the one in front of station 1. So if we just build a loop like this with a single block break in front of station 1, then a train will spawn in every station when we reset the ride. The problem is that only rides that calculate G-forces have access to block breaks. With a capacity of 42 guests per train, the hypercoaster would do quite well and get close to the monorail's throughput and thus profit, but I just can't manage to have the queue lines fill up quick enough for this. That 90% chance to not enter the queue line is simply too much. Even with over 2,000 guests in this tiny circle, I only have achieved roughly the same as the twister coaster for short moments. What we can do is load up tons of guests in the queue line first and then do a test with those. That's not entirely valid, as it's not sustainable over a long time period, but it does give us an idea of how strong this could be. With nearly 1,000 guests in every queue line, I still could not do a full month of testing, so I stopped after 22 days and converted the 71,420 euros the coaster made in that time to guests and profit per hour. This ride managed to get a stunning throughput of 35,477 guests per hour and a corresponding profit of 709,539 euros an hour. This is just completely mad for just one ride and shows how overpowered the resetting strategy would be if guests weren't so scared of G-forces. And that were the most profitable rides in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2. For more extreme records, click here to learn about the highest G-forces possible. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.